Hello, my name is Josh, and today I'm going to do a review on the first Marvel Masterworks volume of The Amazing Spider-Man, which collects the first 10 issues of the series. Ever since I was a very little kid, I always loved Spider-Man. I was obsessed with the Raimi movies when I was little, and I watched all the animated series, played the video games, collected action figures. Once I started middle school, I read the original Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and John Romita Sr. run on The Amazing Spider-Man, which I fell in love with. Those books left a very strong impression on me. It cemented many things about the character, mainly that he still remains the bee's knees. I'm older now, 21 years old, and wanted to revisit these stories. See what new things I pick up on, to perhaps pontificate on old comic books. Going into these books, I had a hypothesis. Spider-Man is the Larry David of the Marvel Universe. I can confirm that my hypothesis is correct. Both from reading this and from reading other Marvel stories of the times, he gets into awkward situations, misunderstandings, where he comes out looking like a jerk, and he makes people very upset. People don't really like him. He is a bit more than just Larry David, though. He is the snot-nosed brat, the unruly schoolboy of the Marvel Universe. He is a spectacle-wearing superhero both outside the costume, but also inside the costume. Instead of a traditional Marvel superhero being given the Errol Flynn-inspired swashbuckling wit and charm, it's this teenager trying to replicate that model to learn responsibility, and importantly, how to define responsibility. He is simply the perfect lovable dork and social outcast, easily resonating with other nerdy and geeky weirdos, like me. The perspective of a geeky and dorky loser outsider gives the series a sobering realism that feels unique for the time it was penned and illustrated. One neat touch is the DIY aspect. Peter is very resourceful and scrappy. We see Peter interact with appliances like a vacuum or a hose to defeat Sandman and Electro respectively. Peter makes his own web shooters and web fluid, and makes different variations of the web fluid for different functions. Wings to fly, shield to defend himself, etc. For mobility, he uses the buildings around him to get from place to place, and even webs 2 trees to slingshot himself across the city. He also uses his connections at the Daily Bugle, the establishment he works at, to travel outside the country. Overall, Spider-Man is a very practical superhero. This realism extends the narrative choices as well, with both comedic and dramatic examples taken into account. For comedy, we have situations where Spider-Man isn't able to cash in a check because he is unwilling to give up his secret identity, or when he thinks they stopped criminals, but really he just disturbed innocent civilians. Things like this. However, situations like Aunt May's money issues or her falling ill, and Peter having to take care of her, is legitimately really sad and rough. It's impressive that Lee and Ditko are so effective at balancing the drama and the comedy in these older issues and stories. I love all the characters and villains, absolute classics, creations that have stood the test of time. I love Peter with his almost Max Fisher-esque disposition. Liz as the love interest and Peter's crush, who starts out as a judgmental preppy student and develops into someone with more respect and empathy for Peter. Flash is the obnoxious and abrasive jock bully who provides comic relief and grief for Peter. Aunt May is excellent as the doting parent. She provides comic relief while also being a crucial part of the more serious moments in these 10 issues. Jameson is wonderful as the grumpy boss who feels much of the public mistrust towards Spider-Man, and also is revealed to have a bit more pathos in regards to his hatred towards Spider-Man. We can understand where he's coming from, even if we disagree with him. And we also have Betty, who is pretty awesome too. She works really well as a character who has a parallel with Peter, being a young person who has a sad past that still haunts them. She works really well as a love interest, and I buy that they would like each other from what I've read thus far. And this will later be expanded on in subsequent issues, so I'm not going to get into it too much, but it is very well done. I also love the villains. Lots of classic villains make their appearances here, like Dr. Octopus, the Lizard, Sandman, Chameleon, and the Vulture. An issue with my favorite supervillain of all time, Dr. Doom, is also a villain that's featured, which is pretty sweet. Obscure Creation, The Living Brain, also appears and has a fun issue where he's fighting Spider-Man. In the last issue, we get a hint of the more crime-centric focus that Spider-Man will fixate on as the issues go on, with Spider-Man fighting the Enforcers and the Big Man. Spider-Man fighting gangsters, and of course a mystery, are two things that will be expanded on as the series will go on, with a character that will be introduced in the next Marvel Masterworks volume. Overall, I still love these issues, and I recommend them to anybody looking to go and get into Spider-Man, or just looking for a fun superhero comic, or even just a humble coming-of-age story. It's really wonderful stuff across the board. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great, great day.